Welcome to Sales Bites by Journey, where we talk about everything you need to know to be a killer at sales. I'm your host, Will Jenkins. Let's get it. Hello, and welcome to Sales Bites by Journey. My name is Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey. And today I'm joined by Krystian Gebis, CEO and founder of Shipper CRM, and also co-founder of Free Caviar. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. It's always fun to sit down and talk sales with you. Before we dive in and get into your topic for today, I'd love to have you give the audience just a quick 10,000 foot overview of your background.
Sure. My background started in robotics and computer engineering. That's what I studied in college. Prior to that, I was tinkering around with a bunch of different video games and automating, finding ways to automate these games. That was kind of how my foray into software engineering started. And that's how I also ended up getting into robotics. But my first company that I started out of school, left after my junior year, I was just super eager to just build my own company. My first company was a self-driving truck company. It was a lower level of autonomy. We aimed to make it easier and safer to hire new drivers with no experience, so they were less likely to cause an accident and more fuel efficient. I worked on that for about 5.5 years. We raised about $3 million or so. And as you can imagine, that was a very challenging endeavor, especially for your first company.
Yeah.
Supply chain issues, there's a lot of technical challenges, but it was a hell of a ride, and I don't regret any part, of pursuing that opportunity. I still largely believe that there's a pretty big opportunity in that space. But anyway, about 3 years ago or so, I stopped working. I decided to shut down a company, and ended up pursuing things outside of robotics, and decided, how do I go and find ways to build software only in a way that at the time would effectively, my only goal was, like, I just need to make enough money on my own to prove I can, just enough to be able to move out of my parents' house. And after the first company didn't end up working out, it was definitely a low point in my life. Moved back in with my parents, ended relationship too, actually, throughout that tenure. And so yeah, came out on the opposite side of it pretty well. I met Paul over Twitter. He DM'd me, and then we started working on Free Caviar and Shipper CRM.
Nice, man. Well, you've got a ton of really, really advanced experience with a lot of different tech tools and whatnot. And also, you understand how to sell because you've raised money and you've built businesses, and then now continuing to build both Shipper CRM and Free Caviar. So I know today you wanted to talk about email as a sales tactic and how to write good emails, how to get people's attention. So I'm going to take some notes. I'll let you kick it off where you want to start there, and I'll ask a couple questions.
Sure. I think I'd like to preface all of this by saying that in today's day, we notice that there's a lot of email. Like, we get a lot more. I get a lot more emails now than I maybe have ever gotten before, and there's really a defining trait as to which ones I actually spend time opening and realizing. And you can immediately tell nowadays if the email is AI generated, and it uses kind of keywords. It's structured to build an email for you based on just some random attribute about yourself or the company that you're working with, or in some cases the company that I'm no longer working with. And I often find it that people are really trying to sell without really thinking through, like, how it ends up being received on the other side. And this wasn't exactly something that I knew how to do day one. Like, I wasn't born with it. But
Right.
I do attribute a lot of the success I was able to find so far actually, I signed up for a sales course, which before, obviously, I knew, Journey and all this stuff existed. I signed up for a sales course through this gentleman. His name was Josh Braun, I think. And one of the main things that he emphasized on, which I really took to heart, was people don't like to read emails. I don't like to spend time reading emails. So the longer the email is, the more taxing it is on a person to actually process that. And it literally requires energy to go through a long email. So the shorter the email, the better. And one framework that I've found to be useful is if you treat email almost very similarly to how you would treat texting with somebody in like iMessage. Usually it's very short, sweet, to the point, and it makes it easy for the person to A, process what you're saying, and then B, respond maybe more immediately, right? And so I went from sending these like really long emails with, I put a lot of effort into them, poured my heart out into writing it out, and I just wasn't getting much responses. But as soon as I started trimming it down to the bare bones essentials, right? The person that I'm reaching out to, if I'm reaching out to them cold, they usually don't know who I am. So I just very briefly, in a few words, just say who I am and be honest about like, hey, I'm reaching out completely cold. You don't know who I am, but I'm working on such and such. And I was curious. I think that the last part of when you structure an email should you should always try to structure the end of the email in such a way that it does not invite very easily the individual who you're sending it to respond with yes or no. That's just it's just a very easy way for them to get you off, kind of get you off their plate. You don't really know whether they're truly interested in it. Maybe they're still going to find your product valuable. But leaving an open-ended question, asking them about maybe how their process works, right? That you've seen patterns at other companies where there's a slow, processing speed, or when it comes to operations, for example, that it takes a significant amount of time to do something. Statistically, like if you provide value in that email and if you find a way to do it very succinctly, right? That person reads it as if it's kind of like news. They got some information, they got some value out of spending time reading your email, right? Spending or giving you energy to read your email. So find ways to add value, like meaningful value, right? Some statistic or something that they may not know of. I would kind of pause there, but
Yeah, I
that
think there's a lot to be said about writing short, direct emails and then having good proof points. I think about a lot of the people I've learned from in sales in general. Most of the time, we're talking like 30-word emails, sometimes a little bit shorter. There are occasions where you've built some rapport with the person and maybe it makes sense to have a longer email to explain something. But if it's purely cold, like you're saying, you have to have something of value, some kind of social proof, and it needs to be quick and to the point because, man, there's so much going on for decision makers. They have so many more important things to do than read our emails that you got to catch up right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the best type of email is a warm email. So if you can get an intro to somebody, that would be, that's usually even better. But particularly in freight, like if you're reaching out to shippers, for example, you may not know, obviously, the majority of the shippers that you do reach out to. So tailoring your email, for example, if you're a carrier or a broker, in either case, right? Tailoring your email and crafting your email around specific information pertaining to that company. For example, if they have a particular location in Kentucky, right, city in Kentucky, you're gonna just let them know, like, hey, I have trucks running in and out of that location all the time. I'm looking for backhauls that could come in competitively. Super simple, sweet, and easy, but you also are letting them know that you actually understand at least a little bit about maybe what their needs might be. You can try to dig in deeper if you can, but providing that context is, I found it to be very difficult for AI to do, and it really needs to be deliberately crafted. It's like an art in its own.
Totally. I think there's this element of like kind of paying your dues before you get there for a sales call. And so if I send Krystian a note and that information has like really thoughtful background information, maybe something short about him, something short about the company that's very relevant, way more likely than if I just send him something line and I'm sending the same kind of thing to everybody and I'm swapping names out, there's just not enough relevance there specific to the person. And those, a lot of times those are the reasons why people respond.
I have seen some. I've had a lot of Shipper Serum customers, or asked a lot of Shipper Serum customers to send me the cold emails that they have sent to some of their prospects, and I very quickly tried helping them understand two things. The ones that I mentioned in the beginning. The longer the email, the more less likely it is that somebody's going to read it. And here's just a couple of pointers and tips. Like the more you highlight, like spastically almost, like across your entire email, the more chaotic it like looks like, and it's kind of weird because like usually colors, flashing colors. Um, I've read a lot about like when you see like flashing colors or casinos, it usually like attracts attention. But for some reason in emails, the more colorful you make your email, the less likely it is to want to be read.
I
Seems
think
super
they I
texty.
think they just look unprofessional, especially if it's the first or second engagement. Like if Christian doesn't know me and my email has all these highlights and bolds and stuff, it doesn't look great aesthetically. Maybe later in the relationship when we've got some rapport and whatnot, it's a little bit different.
Yeah. And also I've also found that a very common um, a very common sentence or set of sentences that are included in these cold outreach emails are kind of self boasting in a way. And if you are to do that, right, make sure that it's concrete, that it's objective. It's not subjective in the sense that everybody can call themselves the number one best in the world, right? But when somebody reads this, when I would read something like this, if there's really no hard evidence behind the fact that you're the one number one best in the world, like let me infer that this is the best thing in the world, right? Tell me what it is very objectively that you're offering, and how it's different from somebody else. I find carriers often mentioning, we've been in existence for 20 years, and that's sometimes helpful to know that you've been around for a while. But from a differentiation perspective, really all the customer that you're reaching out to is looking for is what kind of services you can provide. Are you available? Do you have competitive pricing? Um, and well, yeah, what type of equipment do you have? Do you have the equipment that that they would need? Do you have the capacity, uh, availability to serve their needs? Those are the types of things that they're going to be. Really, that's what I mean. Would you agree that the shippers primarily look for those factors? What else would they look for?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the ability to execute freight and having familiarity with that particular service or mode or commodity. And the stance that I've taken for a long time is that the best salespeople are not employed at your company. They are actually your customers, the people buying your service today, because they're putting up their money and saying that Christian's good at what he does, and so I continue to pay him to do whatever it is. And so if we're talking about carriers trying to win more business or brokers trying to land new customers, let's think about who we successfully transact with today and how do I use that social proof to engage new opportunities and let them, air quotes, sell on my behalf. Maybe it's a landing page, a case study, a quick quote, a blurb. But one of the things you mentioned is you got to be able to back up what you're saying. So if you're saying you're the best at X, there better be some people buying that from you today that are also willing to say that you're that. And it makes
Yeah.
it so much easier. Like it's just a lot easier for people to believe when it comes from, another party that says, yeah, like they're really good at that.
Yeah, and it kind of brings up also the question is like, well, what if you don't yet have customers? What if you're brand new to the market, right? Like, how do you cold start your situation then, right? And I think it's just maybe a slightly different strategy that you got to take because you don't really have much to back up in that case. And I think this is my personal opinion, but I feel like framing the, for example, the email in and making it really personal, like uh, maybe the wrong word here to use is vulnerable, but something along the lines of vulnerable in the sense that, like, for example, when I was sending emails out in my last company, Autobahn, we were after we pivoted from self-driving trucks to cargo cameras, I was reaching out to a lot of 3PLs and carriers as well, and I was letting them know like, hey, look, I'm a founder. I was young. I'm hungry to, find ways to help customers. And there was not much that I really had. There was not much evidence that I had, but just on the sole merit of the fact that I'm letting them know who I am, maybe even mentioning things that oftentimes people might look frowned upon, for example. Um, like maybe, oh, this guy's like really young or something like that. Those things kind of establish a sense of, oh, this is like a true person behind the email, and it's like a real intent to want to do business with
So
me.
I think being a transparent, kind of authentic person does shine through in sales, whether it be in an actual call or, as we're talking about here, in email. There's a lot to be said about finding ways to just like talk about who you are a little bit. We don't want to make the whole conversation about me, but you're unique and different. And so if that is something that's going to make someone respond to your email, at the end of the day, man, we got to get responses so that we can start these conversations to figure out if we can transact together. So a lot of different ways to think about how to make that happen. As you get ready to wrap up here, I'm going to go through a couple of notes that I took, and then I want to see if there's anything else that you would like to mention when you think about writing good emails. So first thing is that people don't like emails, man. We get a ton. I probably get a couple hundred per day. A lot of them don't end up being relevant. And so if we want people to pay attention, shorter is better. Quick, right there, very relevant for them. You want response options to be open-ended. I thought this was very, very, very smart, right? You want to avoid being disqualified, yes or no, to what you're saying. Sometimes that could pigeonhole you. You want this to be like an open-ended conversation. And then you want to have some proof points to back up what you're saying. And then being yourself and being authentic matters. No one can be you. You are you. You're, very, very different and differentiated as an individual. And so you can use that to your advantage as you're having conversations with customers.
And tread the line very carefully around how much you talk about yourself. Like, try to establish that as early and as quickly as possible as proof. But outside of that, change the focus to the customer, their needs, learning about them, understanding their problems better as soon as you can. That was definitely one thing that I've seen way too many times in these emails. It's like two paragraphs about yourself and the company. And I'm like, okay, well, let's jump to the end, and maybe there's something like a question or for me or whatever.
Right.
So
Awesome. Well, Krystian, thank you so much for joining us today on Sales Bites. Really appreciate it.
absolutely.